All right, for more on this, let's bring in Richard Weitz. He is the director of the Center for Political and Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. Richard, thanks for joining us. Now, Richard, al-Baghdadi has been claimed killed, well, several times before. None of those claims proved legitimate. How likely is it that this time it is indeed true, and how can that be verified?
The Russians themselves say it's just a possibility. According to the Russian account, they were informed that there was going to be a meeting of senior people to include Baghdadi. They told the Americans they were going to launch an airstrike. They did so. And so they speculated it's possible that among the people they killed was him. But there is no way we can verify this. Normally what would happen is if this occurred, the Islamic State themselves would announce his death, because that's normally what their practice. But because it's their top leader, maybe they're more sensitive about it. But most likely he wasn't there, and he's still around. As you said, his death has been stated before. I thought your reporter beforehand made a good account of why he probably wasn't at the meeting. So we don't know, but it's interesting to speculate if he was killed, what a coup this would be for Russia, because as you know, the criticism that the Pentagon and others have been making of the Russian military campaign in Syria has not really been focused on ISIS. It's more focused on any opponents of the regime, which includes ISIS, but is more the moderate opposition that the U.S. is supporting.
Absolutely. This kind of legitimizes Russia's presence in Syria. They say it's there to fight terrorism. Many would say it's there to support the Bashar al-Assad regime. And of course, this would help their case that they're helping out in the fight against ISIS. Regarding ISIS, though, Richard, if he is dead, how significant is it? Does it really change much? Is there another leadership position, a person that's ready to just take up the position? Would it impact operations?
That's an interesting question, because Baghdadi isn't like bin Laden or some of the other leaders of terrorist groups, which are very strongly personality-centered. And once you kill the top person, the movement tends to fall apart, break into factions, and so on. In this case, it appears to be operating more at the level of the field commanders. According to the way the military campaigns are going in Iraq and Syria, they're taking longer than we had hoped. But at some point, both those strongholds will fall. And so the movement, if it's going to persist, will have to be done at the centralized level, using internet connections, individual cells, and so on. And it appears the movement is moving in that direction. And so if you just kill a top leader who isn't really having much influence, I don't know if it would have much impact on that campaign.
Now, you mentioned bin Laden, and it's believed that there have been some efforts to unite al-Qaeda with Islamic State, and one of the reasons that hasn't happened, one of the resistors, have been Baghdadi. If he is indeed dead, do you see that happening? Do you see better relations, which of course would be very problematic, between al-Qaeda and Islamic State?
No, I think that there's a real deep-rooted rivalry between the two groups. There's some ideological differences. There are differences in tactics. So I'm not expecting that would be the case. I mean, what is more likely scenario is if Islamic State is defeated in Syria and Iraq and loses influence because of the loss of its leadership and loss of its territory, then al-Qaeda, rather than merging, will just re-emerge as the main opponent or be superseded by some other group.
And Richard, to that point, whether it's al-Qaeda, whether it's al-Baghdadi, does any of this actually help unless that extreme Islamic ideology that fuels groups like al-Qaeda or al-Shabaab or Hamas or Islamic States, does that help unless that core issue of the ideology is somehow addressed?
Right. Well, certainly the military campaign is important. I mean, if we can deny these kind of groups safe haven, access to territory, whether it be in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, then it makes it much harder for them to operate, much harder for them to do operational security and so on. So that's important. But as you mentioned, they're still going to be able to recruit, they're still being able to have influence because there are people attracted to this ideology of violence, extreme Islam, and so so on. But one of the big problems we've had is that it's easy to, at least conceptually, to determine how you can win a military campaign, deprive these groups of territory, kill their leaders and members. It's a lot harder to know what we could do that would basically undermine, destroy, weaken the ideology to plus a point that it's not a major terrorist threat, because there appears, people are motivated at different reasons. It's probably not one cause at work. It's not clear what if you address grievances or you have to take other steps. So it's a lot harder to know what the magic formula is to eliminate the drive towards extremism.
But Richard, if ISIS is indeed defeated, do you see that having any impact on those what have been called like lone wolf operators that have been carrying out these terrorist attacks in the UK and in Europe? Is there any way, regardless of which Islamic terrorist group is at the forefront, be it Al-Qaeda, be it Islamic State, to ever address that kind of mentality?
Okay, breaking that apart into two questions. The question about Islamic State, would their defeat, loss of territory in Iraq and Syria and so on have an impact, death of Baghdadi? I would say yes. I think in the short term it'll make them more violent, more prone to rely on themselves, but I think in the long term it would undermine them, because one of their main sources of appeal is that they can say we're resurrecting the caliphate, come, here it is. And if they don't have that, that sort of deprives them of a major source of attraction. But the second part of your question, can we ever defeat Islamic extremism and terrorism? We still haven't figured out how to do that, and the problem is there are just so many people in the world who could potentially join, and even if a small percentage of those are the only ones that join, that's still a major terrorist threat. So I don't know how we would end this. I think it's a question of reducing it to manageable proportions, and over time it may fade out, but it's hard to know what we could do to achieve that.
Yeah, it certainly is. We appreciate your analysis. Richard Weitz, thank you.